I think the crime, the $40 million robbery that just took place of Shedeur Sanders, or should I say, I think the crime, the $50 million robbery of Shedeur Sanders, because that's what I just witnessed.
So a lot of times when you go to these combine meetings, teams give you things to challenge you. Teams will have a player's worst plays ready for him, and they'll show him his worst plays and say, hey, why don't you explain them? And Shedeur apparently didn't take to it well. And at one point, one of the few teams that actually was interested in him said, well, what do you make of this really bad play? And Shedeur said, maybe I'm not the guy for you. That's not the answer.
What we just saw go down was wild because the NFL draft is supposed to be a full-blown celebration where talent gets crowned and everyone walks into their future shining bright. But for Shedeur Sanders in the spring of 2025, that dream flipped fast, turning into a straight-up nightmare right in front of the entire country. What should have been a moment of joy cracked open into a situation so shocking that lawyers started circling like it was playoff season. Shedeur, star quarterback from Colorado and son of Hall of Famer Deion Sanders, had been hyped as a locked-in top 10 pick. Guaranteed cash, guaranteed spotlight, guaranteed respect. Instead, he dropped all the way to the 5th round at pick 144, landing in Cleveland while everyone watching sat there stunned like, what just happened? And now the whispers aren't whispers anymore. They're straight booming. The Sanders family is reportedly gearing up to take the NFL and multiple team owners to court, firing off accusations of collusion, defamation, and major loss of future earnings. This isn't some tiny disagreement. This has the potential to explode into one of the biggest legal battles pro football has seen in decades. And once you start digging into it, everything gets even stranger. To the public, Shedeur's draft slide didn't make any sense at all. He led the NCAA with a wild 74.1% completion rate, broke several school records, and became the centerpiece of one of the most talked about offenses in the nation. For months, this was one of the most talked about college football stories in the last 20 years, and everyone in the scouting world kept repeating the same thing. Shedeur wasn't supposed to fall past the early 2nd round, but instead he sat there waiting and waiting and waiting through 3 long, stressful draft days until his name finally got called in a moment that shocked everyone watching. Pick 144 didn't feel like a normal draft pick. It turned into a moment nobody in that building will ever forget. The entire stadium reacted like it had just been hit with a lightning bolt, and the shockwave blasted across social media in seconds, sending everything into pure chaos. At Shedeur's private draft party, the camera suddenly cut away, the champagne stayed sealed, and the whole room froze in a silence so heavy you could almost feel it pressing against your chest. Deion Sanders didn't sugarcoat anything afterward. He reportedly told close friends, "This league just blackballed my son." And at first it sounded like a father speaking from deep hurt after watching his kid get blindsided on the biggest night of his life. But then the leaks started dropping hard. According to internal communications pulled by a private investigator working with the Sanders legal team, there are messages, not yet public, that are now being reviewed by multiple independent outlets. Several NFL owners allegedly complained about the so-called media chaos and brand baggage they believe Shedeur would bring into their franchise, and that's where everything starts getting even messier. The documents reportedly point to quiet back-channel talks where ownership groups were encouraging each other to avoid drafting Shedeur unless they had absolutely no choice. People close to the Sanders camp say these private conversations directly mention Deion Sanders' comments during Super Bowl week. Those Coach Prime interviews where he made it clear that they planned to set their own terms and wouldn't suit up for certain teams. The whole...
How long you been playing in the NFL?
I played 9 years.
Chase, you like
14. 4 of them.
4? So that's a lot of years here, right? We ain't never heard this before.
Never.
You know why? Because you drafted a first-round quarterback in the 5th round. That's the truth of it. You try to teach him a lesson, now it backfired. Because the 3rd-round quarterback, we try to be respectful. Chase, I'm respectful. I get it. You're a quarterback and all that, and I get all that. But we know he's not better than Shedeur. We know what the team knows, the player knows.
Eli Manning blueprint was sitting right there in plain sight. But this time, according to what's being alleged, the league didn't respond with open negotiation. Instead, everything shifted into quiet hallways, closed-door whispers, and straight-up silent sabotage. Insiders tied to the lawsuit claim the upcoming filing will accuse the NFL of running a coordinated effort to drag down Shedeur's draft stock, not because of his talent, but because of politics, pride, and the way he handled the media spotlight. And the deeper this story goes, the crazier the claims get, because sources connected to the investigation say there were team executives swapping messages that hinted Shadow was becoming too loud and too independent for their comfort. These weren't concerns about football. They were worries about control, image, and who gets to call the shots. One investigator reviewing the files even said some owners were nervous that signing Shadow meant dealing with a family that actually demanded fairness and refused to play the quiet game behind the scenes. That fear alone had certain front offices scrambling, especially after those Super Bowl week interviews lit up every sports show in the country. What really shocks people is that several analytics departments inside the league reportedly still rank Shadow as a first-round talent, yet their final draft boards suddenly dropped him down out of nowhere. That kind of shift doesn't happen for no reason, and the Sanders legal team is ready to argue that those changes were pushed from the top down, not from scouting reports. Now, multiple insiders are saying this might turn into a massive showdown, because if these messages get released publicly, the league could be facing one of the most embarrassing moments in its history. But it doesn't stop there, because people familiar with the early legal drafts say the Sanders team is preparing to bring in expert witnesses who will break down every single scouting report, draft grade.
Mad at Cleveland if they played the cards and picked them up in the 5th round and saved $50 million. Maybe in their minds, they figure they tricked off that money to Deshaun, so they got to trick it back off of Shador.
And front office decision that suddenly shifted right before draft day. These experts are expected to show how Shadow's numbers didn't drop, his interviews didn't go bad, and his medical checks were clean, yet somehow his value cratered overnight. Some sources even claim that a few team scouts were shocked when their reports were rewritten or reinterpreted by higher-ups without any explanation. That kind of move has everybody raising eyebrows because it points straight toward decisions being made far above the football department in rooms where business politics matter more than on-field talent. And now there's talk that a couple of former executives, people who aren't in the league anymore and don't owe anyone silence, might be willing to testify if this turns into a full courtroom battle. If that happens, this case could flip from big to explosive real quick. Right now, all eyes are on the Sanders legal team, because they're gathering everything from email trails to meeting logs, and they're building a timeline that they believe will prove Shadow wasn't passed over for performance, he was passed over on purpose. And while the league is trying to keep everything quiet, the pressure is building fast because sports networks, reporters, and legal analysts are all circling this story like it's the biggest storm of the year. Everyone wants to know how a quarterback with Shadow's resume ended up being treated like a late-round gamble instead of a legit franchise leader. Reporters close to the investigation say there's already tension inside NFL headquarters, with some staff worrying that if the wrong files leak, it could expose patterns the league has spent years trying to hide. That fear alone has teams calling emergency meetings, trying to figure out what they said, who they said it to, and how bad it might look if it goes public. Meanwhile, Shadow has stayed mostly quiet in public, but insiders say he's focused, calm, and ready to let the truth come out through the legal process. People around him say he's not chasing revenge. He's chasing respect, and he wants every team that doubted him to explain exactly why they did it. And now fans are jumping into the mix, demanding answers and calling for transparency, because everyone saw the talent, everyone saw the numbers, and everyone saw the drop that made no sense. The question hanging over the whole league right now is simple. Was this just a bad draft slide, or was something way deeper happening behind the scenes? Yeah, but he said, "I'm not gonna do it publicly, I'll do it private." And that comment alone had people buzzing. After the draft, analysts at Fox Sports tried to break everything down, but their explanations didn't sit right with a whole lot of viewers. Some claimed he's not a generational talent, others said he doesn't have the intangibles, and a few even pushed the idea that he carried too much so-called baggage. But every one of those talking points only made the Sanders legal team dig in deeper. And how does a quarterback with better completion numbers than the first overall pick fall more than 130 spots? Why did so many national scouts rank him sky high while not a single NFL GM stepped up to defend their own evaluations in public? According to people inside the Sanders camp, this wasn't some simple mismatch or misunderstanding. They believe it was a coordinated move meant to send one loud message: players don't choose their own destiny. We do! And no comment hit the conversation harder than Colin Cowherd's now famous line.
Another moment. What they do during the film and the combine and the meetings is teams will install mistakes intentionally planted in the install, and they want you to catch them. Shedeur didn't, and when a coach called him out, once again, it didn't sit well. It's like, bro, there's not many teams needing quarterbacks, especially since Pittsburgh appears to have a deal with Aaron Rodgers and Tennessee's getting Cam Ward. So you're down to the Giants, who were not interested at all, and Cleveland, who traded out of that 2 spot because clearly they were looking for next year's class like the Rams.
Nobody wants a celebrity backup quarterback. Attorneys connected to the case are reportedly dissecting that quote word for word, treating it like a key piece of evidence that's already being locked into early drafts of the legal complaint. Let's be real. This fight isn't only about Shadow. This isn't just about Shadow. This is about Deion Sanders standing face to face with the entire NFL machine. Coach Prime has been shaking up the sport for years with his bold recruiting style and non-stop media presence, turning Colorado into the center of college football without even needing a championship to do it. And the NFL definitely wasn't thrilled about the idea of Shadow stepping into their world and shaking up their system too. From hinting he might pull an Eli-style move to straight up skipping interviews with teams he didn't vibe with, Shadow wasn't following the usual script one bit, and a league built on hierarchy, old school order, and strict structure reportedly didn't take that lightly at all. One executive allegedly told a scout, "You're not just drafting Shadow, you're inheriting the entire Prime brand." And in a league full of sensitive egos and owners who watch headlines like hawks, that alone had some of them whispering a quiet, "No thanks." That kind of pressure scared certain front offices before they even watched the tape. Then came the other twist. Shadow skipped the NFL Combine and didn't show up for the Senior Bowl. Was that straight confidence, or was it a calculated strategy to avoid giving teams any extra control over his narrative? Either way, those choices sparked debates all over sports media because some analysts said he was protecting his value while others insisted he was challenging league traditions in a way that made certain teams uncomfortable. And once that narrative started spreading, it took on a life of its own, painting Shadow as too independent before he ever touched an NFL field. Behind the scenes, a few agents started whispering that skipping the combine gave certain executives an excuse to label him as difficult, even though plenty of top players have skipped those events before. But when Shadow did it, suddenly it became a huge talking point, and the timing of that shift raised a lot of serious questions. People close to the situation say some teams were worried that if they drafted him, they'd be dealing with a quarterback who wouldn't let them dictate everything. And that kind of attitude can scare the old school decision makers who still run most front offices. Instead of looking at his talent, they started looking at control, and that's where the whole evaluation got twisted. And now those same decisions are being examined under a legal microscope because the Sanders team wants to know exactly why harmless choices were turned into red flags when the numbers, the film, and the on-field leadership all said he was a top-tier pick. And once draft night hit, all those little whispers, quiet doubts, and backroom opinions seemed to pile up at the exact same moment, turning Shadow's big night into one of the most confusing scenes fans had ever watched. Every time another quarterback got picked ahead of him, the cameras kept cutting back to his draft party, and you could see the mood shifting from excitement to disbelief. By the time the third round rolled around, even analysts who had criticized him were admitting on live TV that something didn't feel normal about how far he was sliding. Some of them even started asking if there was information being passed around privately that the public wasn't allowed to see, because the drop just didn't match his stats or his tape. Insiders say that inside the green rooms, front offices were scrambling, second-guessing, and swapping last-minute notes like they were trying to solve a puzzle nobody had the full picture of. It created this weird tension, like everyone knew something.
Primetime Deion Sanders' natural bravado, coupled with that of his son. They say that the whole interview process wasn't that impressive when he showed up at the NFL scouting combine and refused to work out. That hurt him. The interview process while he was there hurt him, etc., etc. You know what, y'all? I get it. It makes perfect damn sense if he's drafted in the second round. It's the fact that he fell to fifth that's alarming.
Something was happening, but nobody wanted to be the first to say it out loud. And when Cleveland finally called his name, it didn't feel like relief. It felt like a punchline to a joke nobody wanted to laugh at. And that's exactly why the Sanders legal team believes draft night might be the strongest piece of evidence in their entire case. Deion has always said the game film should be the one doing the talking. But once teams started getting irritated about the interviews, whether they actually happened or not, the rumors began flying fast. Suddenly, people were whispering that Shadow was entitled, that he didn't have the awareness teams wanted, and that he would never accept being anything less than quarterback one. And that's when the real damage started blasting across the airwaves. Anonymous scouts began popping up everywhere, throwing shade at his personality and leadership to national outlets, claiming, "We know what the team knows, the player knows, we know," like they were dropping some secret intel. But the Sanders legal team doesn't think any of those leaks were random. They believe it looks deliberate, targeted, and organized to hit his draft value right where it hurts. Their argument is simple. The mission wasn't just to critique him, it was to devalue the player, shrink the brand, and humble the entire family. And once you look at the numbers, the impact hits like a straight punch to the chest. A top 10 pick in 2025 pulls in around $35 million over 4 years without even trying. But the deal Shadow signed in Cleveland, just $4.6 million with barely any guaranteed cash and nowhere near what a quarterback with his resume was expected to pull in. That's why the lawsuit is reportedly aiming for over $100 million, arguing that the league's actions didn't just cut his immediate salary, they slashed his endorsements, wiped out branding opportunities, and disrupted the long-term income that comes with being treated like a true franchise quarterback. On top of all that, there's the hit to Deion's brand, his public standing, and even his recruiting power, especially if the NFL ends up looking like it quietly lined up against his son. Damage like that stacks up fast, and insiders say the league is watching this situation way closer than they'd ever admit in public.
Will you step in and do some of that if it's the wrong organization and say he ain't going there?
Yeah, but I'm not going to do it publicly. I'll do it privately.
Owners are reportedly heated, calling the possible lawsuit noise and attention-seeking. But behind closed doors, some of them are so worked up, they're firing off private threats like it's nothing. One unnamed AFC executive was even quoted saying, "If they sue, they're done. He'll never get another snap." That kind of talk shows how tense this whole thing is getting. But people close to Shadow say he's not scared of any of that at all, not even a little. They say he'd rather risk getting pushed out of the league than sit back, stay quiet, and let the story get twisted without fighting back. One anonymous confidant from the Sanders circle was quoted saying, "They want to make an example out of Shadow. Instead, he's going to make an example out of them." And that line has been echoing through legal circles ever since, especially among the attorneys connected to the situation. Sources believe this lawsuit could hit federal court within weeks, and it might not stop with just the NFL, not even close. There are heavy whispers that media outlets, scouting services, and even individual general managers could get subpoenaed for their internal messages, draft notes, and behind-the-scenes conversations. And if the Sanders family really has the receipts, emails, texts, recorded calls, this whole situation could explode into a full-scale scandal that hits harder than anything football has seen in years. Right now, Shadow is keeping his head down, practicing quietly with the Browns, staying off social media, and moving like someone who's locked in on the long game. But don't get it twisted. This storyline is only heating up, and the next chapter could shake the entire league if these allegations are proven real. The NFL didn't just mishandle a draft pick, they might have fumbled an entire future empire, and the Sanders family is coming after everything they believe was taken from them. If you want to keep up with every twist and turn in this wild story, make sure you like, subscribe, comment, and share, and I'll catch you in the next one.